We are live on Facebook. Welcome to the Mass Bay RRE Third Thursday online for Thursday, August 20th, 2020. Thank you all for signing up. I want to apologize. Of course, the people I should be apologizing to probably aren't here because I neglected to send out the reminder email notice I usually do yesterday. Just a few announcements before we get started. First of all, we will be doing virtual meetings from now through the end of the year at least. We are due to governor's guidelines for group meetings. We're unable to have a meeting in the church, and church isn't open for us at this point anyway. So the board has decided to stick with virtual programming through the end of the year. And so what we've got coming up is next month, and anyway, August, should be our August program. You guys can look up the dates. The August program, Derek Carter is going to be doing UK Rails in 2017. October, Dan Howard is going to be doing a program on short lines in Western New York. This will be the sort of fill in for those of us who didn't get to go to Jim Fetchero's trip out in Western New York in the Buffalo area. That'll be October. November will be our annual meeting done virtually online, and Gene Fox from the South Coast Rail Project will be giving us an update on that. And then December will be our traditional classic railroad film series. The movie will be Danger Lights, and there will be one change in that. It will not be live streamed, and it will not be posted to YouTube because this is a commercial film, and we want to play nice with the copyright folks. So anyway, that's basically about it. The Callboy, August-September Callboy, mailed on Thursday, and I think a lot of people have probably gotten it. When you do receive it, we did send around a survey to everybody that we have an email address for who gets a Callboy by standard mail. And when your Callboy turns up, we'd appreciate it if you'd just submit the date that your Callboy arrived in the survey if you can. That's about all that I had in terms of announcements. And the other thing is our membership renewal cycle will be starting right after the beginning of September. We'll be sending out email notices to all of our members, and we'll do it online for the first month, month and a half, and then we'll start with the printed notices. If you're not a member of the club, after the first of the year is a great time to join because your membership will carry through to the end of 2021. So you get 16 months for the price of 12. And so anyway, that'll be coming up. And beyond that, if anybody's got any material for the first Tuesday program, which will be Tuesday, September 8th this year, please let me know. We've got a couple of things lined up, but you're welcome to have some more short segments, 10, 15 minutes or less, whatever you got that isn't enough to make a full theme third Thursday program. So anyway, with that, tonight's program is we're going to be taking the train to Tibet, and we're pleased to have as our guest speaker Suzanne Gensica. And I'm going to let Tom Chase do the introduction. So Tom, take it away. Whoops. You unmute yourself.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, I hope you can all hear me. I'm so very pleased to be able to introduce Susanna Gensica and her talk on travel to Tibet. I've been trying to get this to happen for years. We tried to schedule it for a third Thursday meeting soon after she came back. We couldn't seem to find a slot. Then Suzanne moved from a great job at the Boston Museum to an even greater job at the Getty in Los Angeles. I thought we'd never see this talk. But then things changed again, and we started doing talks by Zoom, and I realized Susanna could do this equally well from Los Angeles, and here we are. I can't remember where and when and where I first met Susanna, but it must have been at the Boston Museum in the early 1990s. I immediately realized that we shared a deep interest in Egyptian antiquities. Whenever I visited the museum, I loved seeing what Susanna was working on. In 1998, we worked closely together for 4 months on a particularly difficult project at the MFA, but the results were, of course, outstanding. Susanna sent me a great biographical sketch. Let me read the first couple of paragraphs. Susanna Genske is a senior conservator, head of antiquities conservation at the J. Paul Getty Museum, Los Angeles, California. From 1990 to 2016, she was employed as conservator in objects conservation at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. While at the MFA, she was also responsible for conservation issues for the Nagoya Boston Museum of Fine Arts in Japan. She remains an advisor to the conservation project of the alloy bronze flutes from Merowe, Sudan. And if you Google alloy, A-U-L-O-I, you'll find out all about this. It's a fascinating musicological and conservation problem. Suzanne's training. In 1987, she was awarded a certificate in archaeological conservation from the Römisch-Germanisches Zentralmuseum in Mainz, Germany. I'll interject, that's probably the best museum metal conservation program in the world, followed by an advanced level internship at the MFA and an Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship in Objects Conservation at the Metropolitan Museum, New York. She is a fellow of the International Institute for Conservation and the American Institute for Conservation, and recipient of an individual grant from the Asian Cultural Council for field research in Nepal. But there's more. Suzanne has been a passionate traveler all her life and had the good fortune to carry out some of her work in Egypt, Sudan, Nepal, Uzbekistan, and Japan. Along the way, she enjoyed some long, not always comfortable, but always fascinating train rides. She's going to amaze us with her travels via the Shanghai-Lhasa rail route and a glimpse of Tibet. Since she's not as intense a rail fan as some of us, Dave will fill in after with some railroad details for those of you who are interested. And now Susanna and the Shambhala Express, train T164 Shanghai to Lhasa, Tibet. Susanna.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you all for being here. I hope I'll share my screen. Let's see. Hopefully I can get this all done without glitches. And I need to figure out, bear with me, to get the pointer and as a laser pointer. And then screen show taskbars. So I hope I have all my ducks in a row. So what a pleasure to be here with all of you, mostly unseen participants. You probably had dinner. You may have a drink with you. I'm still in my office. And I do kind of remember, Tom, where we met. And funny enough, it was here at the Getty in 1992 for the conference on historic and ancient and historic metals, for which you provided a great article.
Good memories, Suzanne.
Right, you wrote a great article and presentation with Jane Bassett, with whom I will have Thai dinner on a beach after I'm done with this, with hope not too many blunders. Yeah. Well, these days armchair travel is all we can ask for, so let's get this train and come along for the ride. Of course, some working. Here we go. About 5 years ago, as Tom already mentioned, I had the opportunity to do the proverbial carrying owls. I was scheduled to carry one porcelain from the to Shanghai for a special exhibition. This is beautiful material dated from the 13th to 14th century. And I had a chance to do a very special large. And as it turned out, I was seeing a acupuncturist in Boston who came from Shanghai, who had a travel agent friend from Shanghai, and she started spinning her wheels and created an itinerary. And as I left for Shanghai, it was the porcelain in the cargo section of the plane. I still didn't have any confirmation, no travel permits. It was unnerving, but she promised me it would all arrive. And the plan was that I would embark on the train in Shanghai, here, as you see, all the way down to Lhasa, where I would be met by two gentlemen who would drive me around for a week to see wonderful sights. And then I had a ticket to fly back out. And one day, the registration desk in the hotel provided me with a big envelope with this document, which I could not decipher, but there's my name on it, allowing me to enter Tibet. And more important, what you can see here, this little blue card, which looks almost like a subway ticket, that was a train ticket for T164 Shanghai to Lhasa. And even though I'm not as much a train enthusiast as you are, I think you'll all gave me goosebumps to have this in my hand. And one evening I took the taxi to the Shanghai railway station, very building, and tried to find my. There was not much in English language, and not many people were ready to answer my questions. I was missed the train at the departure because a lot of has happened, but I found the platform. So it's like boarding a plane. The doors open. Yeah.
Your microphone is very unclear. It's cutting in and out. I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't know what we can do to fix that. Maybe you could get a little closer to it. I don't know.
Let me see. Does this sound better to you? Am I clearer?
That sounds better.
Okay. Well, I'll be having my nose to the screen. I won't be able to read notes, so I may blunder some facts. But anyway, this was going down on an escalator to the platform and finding my compartment. And I think in the announcement that you saw, mistake. Well, I'll tell you later about this. Here are some fun facts of this train from Shanghai to Lhasa. It started running in 2006. An extraordinary feat of through the Tibetan plateau. As you can see, the length of the trip is 400 kilometers, so more than 3,000 miles. Goes pretty fast speed, although it's not the Shinkansen, and 12 major stations along the way. It takes 48 hours. My trip took 54, but it's that a little extra time sneaks in. That's it I should show. And here's Shanghai, just to show you landing, and then how do you use the Zhengdu, Tom? To Xi'an.
Yeah.
And then entering the Tibetan plateau, Shinin, Golmund, and down to Lhasa. So as Dave said, when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, it is really like going across the continental US. Here a view of the fancy compartments, the soft sleeper. The compartments had 4 beds, not 6. I remembered that wrong when I put my little abstract together. Very comfortable, very nicely decorated, allegedly Tibetan style. I guess that may be the lotus flowers, if that's what it is. I shared my compartment with a young girl who was going to Shinin in Western China. And we spent the night together, the first night. Right next to our car was the food car where I ate for 2 full days, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I could not remember what I ate, but it was plentiful and it was delicious. So we rambled through the first night and pulled into Xi'an. It was October. It was very foggy, cold, and an unattractive morning as we pulled in past the city walls of Xi'an. And then a small family, father, mother, and boy entered our department, and they got along very well with the Chinese girl and played games while I was reading a fascinating book by Peter Hopkirk, Trespassers on the Roof of the World, about the quest for Lhasa. And the train went on through agricultural areas, small villages. As I said in the abstract, and I've seen that in China before, in the fall, the corn is harvested and roofs are piled high with bright mountains of yellow corn. But of course, I didn't have a good picture to show that to you. We went on further west. The fog lifted, the sun came out. The landscape became more mountainous. Villages were further apart, and we started skirting a river, which here we had a very good view of with one of those spectacular hanging bridges, and it's the Wei River, a tributary to the Yellow River. Oh, let me go back. So night fell, we stopped in Xining, if I pronounced that right, and the small family disembarked, and we went on for another night and woke up in Golmund, which is the station that marks really the beginning of the Lhasa, newly built Lhasa railway, if I get that right. And it was a completely different environment, crisp, clean air, ice on the floor, and the young girl left my compartment and I was left all alone as we went on south across the Tibetan plateau. And what you see here, this is the elevated railway. You see other pictures of it, but it is in large parts built on stilts, on bridges above the ground. We passed Tangula, which is at 5,067 meters, the highest pass that trains pass over in the world. And it also marks the so-called border to the Tibet Autonomous Region. Here is the only picture that I have from my train since I hopped on and just was searching my compartment and didn't notice the entire train. I think you will probably not believe that. And in Lhasa, I equally jumped off the train quickly trying to find my guides. But here is a view of the Tibetan plateau, also called Changtang, which is about twice the size of California, extremely remote, high altitude tundra, maybe you could call it. It's the habitat of large herds of wild animals, of yak, of antelopes, of wild donkeys, and probably many, many other smaller animals, and nomads traditionally herding yak, perhaps, but now there are also goat herders here, goats who provide the famous pashmina wool. It is a fragile environment, and building the railway was certainly invasive, and you read that efforts were made to remove waste during the construction of the railway to be as minimally invasive to this environment. What is probably was the biggest challenge was to provide a stable railway in the soil, which consists of permafrost and so-called soft permafrost, wetlands and grasslands, and also in preparation for climate change. So I gave Tom and Dave a fascinating engineering article about the different measures that were taken to stabilize the roadbed, which includes sections of shading, of isolation areas of crushed rock beds, air ducts that provide ventilation, so-called thermosiphons, and pipes that reduce heat from the ground, as well as active cooling with liquid nitrogen. So the temperature ranges from close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer to -30 in the winter. And in the summer, interestingly, the ground is, of course, colder than the air. And in the winter, it's warmer. And different sections of the soil require different treatment. I think it's all quite fascinating. And they even had narration in the train in English. They're very proud of this railway. Here is a view of the beast that I sat in, which Tom provided at a different time of year, maybe in spring, because the ground is fresh and green. And views along the way. So after sunrise in Golmund, it took until 11 p.m. in the evening to traverse this stunning landscape, which there are no roads. There's no other way to go across unless you, well, you're a nomad and you live with these animals. Large parts of the Shangtang are not drained by rivers, so there are many salt lakes interspersed. And I couldn't get enough looking at it. And let's see, I have a little video for you, which I hope I can activate, but I first need to, let me see. See if that works. I may have to change my pointer to make it, turn it into a real,
yeah.
There it goes. Just to give you an idea what it's like to be moving. Oh, I forgot to press the share sound. If you can't hear them, there's some sappy music along with it. Actually, I like the sappy Tibetan music. And I have no explanation if this is, yeah, what these tanks mean, if that is symbolic or anyway, I think you get the idea. It's quite Zen-like. And then as we drew closer to Lhasa, the mountains became, or the gorges became starker. So I guess we didn't, you're going south. I always say we went down, but I don't think we went down in altitude, but we went through high mountains into a riverbed, high altitude riverbed. And here is another video that Tom provided, which shows the last section of the trip to Lhasa, which I didn't see because it was already dark and all I could see is flickering lights from little hamlets or the occasional car going through this landscape, or I imagine motorcycles zipping over the grassland. So I arrived at the train station in Lhasa, and as I said, I ran away as fast as I could. I actually was a little bit nervous if I would pass, if my papers would pass muster at the control. But there were two gentlemen waiting with my name tag. They brought me to a hotel, and I was happy to find a night's sleep in a real bed. I cannot sleep very well on the trains. And upon waking, I stuck my head out of the hotel, which was located in the old part of Lhasa, and there were chickens and dogs. And looking to the left, there is the Potala Palace, which you're all familiar with, the quintessential symbol of Tibet, and palace of the Dalai Lama, who of course is the spiritual leader and ruler of Tibet. Just a few words about Tibet. It's an ancient theocracy and has been, of course, very difficult to reach, which explains the extreme isolation that it experienced over very long periods of time, except of course for interactions with its southern and northern neighbor, but certainly Europeans got very few glimpses of Tibet until the early 20th century. And many of the travelers who, along the Great Game, tried to sneak into Lhasa in disguise with guides were died along the way of disease or were murdered. And I always think it is similar to the quest for Tibet at the southern edge of the Sahara Desert, which was an equally alluring, mysterious destination that many people tried to find, but did not survive to see. In 1904, the British did walked into Tibet, planted their flag. In 1950, the People's Liberation Army entered Tibet, and in 1951, I'm sure you are all aware, the Chinese established sovereignty, and a few years later, 1959, the Dalai Lama fled. A period followed that brought a lot of destruction, closure of monasteries, atrocities, and I think, you know, it's too soon to. I think my takeaway was that things have changed now, and I will be able to show you some wonderful temples and monasteries that are open again and flourishing. There are about 6.5 million Tibetans, and many live in exile in Nepal, Bhutan, China, and other parts of the world. So here, a closer view of the Potala Palace, whose building began in the 7th century, and which is the seat of the Dalai Lama. It is actually kind of a skyscraper. It's 300 meters tall. It holds 1,000 rooms or more. It has the red part, which is the religious part of the building, and the white, larger sections, the secular parts of the palace. It contains the living quarters of the Dalai Lama, temples, shrines, treasuries, granaries, storerooms, tremendous wealth, cave temples, catacombs and dungeons they did keep prisoners in the Potala. This is the entrance to the Dalai Lama's living quarters, which remain closed these days. And then the entrance that I took with a few local visitors. And then as we go along, I can point out their quintessential auspicious symbols that reoccur over and over again in Tibetan art and architecture. This one is the endless knot, a symbol for the cycle of suffering, of birth, death, and rebirth, and also a symbol of Buddha. I could not take images inside. So in many of these temples, I was able to snap pictures around the edges, but I cannot really show you the Holy of Holiest. But I hope I can still give you an impression. The interiors are richly decorated with painted woodwork, murals, doors with fabulous metal cladding and decorations. And at the bottom of the Potala, I found this image, which is adds a different spiritual dimension beyond Buddhism. The old traditional religion of Tibet is Bon religion. It is based on the reverence for natural sacred sites, trees, rivers, mountain passes, places inhabited by spirits, and it still is part of life, of the religious makeup of Tibetan belief system. And these things up here are skulls, which are, whenever you see skulls, I think they symbolize animal skulls. That it's a site that is part of Bon religion. Then all these stone plates are mani stones, and they're inscribed with the famous Om Mani Padme Hum, which is a widely used Sanskrit mantra. And then below are prayer wheels, which are turned, they're inscribed, and prayer wheels help in the visualization of mantras and provide benefits such as stabilization, concentration, and they also exist in miniature size, which people carry. And here you see Tibetans carrying small prayer wheels in the old part of town, which is called the Bar Khor. And to the right is the Yokang temple, the holiest temple in Tibet, which is circumambulated by people, an endless stream of people. And these few characters here don't do justice to the crowds that I witnessed in, and the circumambulance of the temple is called the Kora. It's a very important aspect of Tibetan life. People come from all over the country, from the faraway regions, and very uncomfortable long days of travel to visit the Yokang temple. Some believers actually travel on hands and knees and prostrate themselves one body length at a time. The devotion that one sees there is breathtaking, is absolutely impressive and beyond anything that I have seen ever before, and it left me deeply, deeply touched. The Yokang temple was built by the first emperor of Tibet, Songtsen Gampo, in the 7th century AD. He married 2 prominent wives, one from Nepal and one from China, and the latter one provided him with an image of the Buddha, which is the most sacred image in the main sanctuary of this temple, which has been enlarged since, of course. Many temples are surmounted by roof ornaments. This is the Wheel of Dharma here with 2 seated deer next to it. Gilded copper ornaments for roofs of temples and monasteries are still produced at large scale in Nepal and the Kathmandu Valley and traded all over Asia and the Himalaya region. Here, this is a particular roof decoration. Keep that in mind. I'm going to show you a detail in a moment. These are the roofs of the Dalai Lama's quarter of this temple, with very, very fanciful gilded copper decoration, fire gilded. There still is wide scale mercury amalgam gilding that is done in the Himalayas. And here is the detail from one of those drum decorations, which is called, it's a popular allegory of the depiction of harmony. It's called the Four Harmonious Animals. There's a bird who provides seeds for the tree, which is watered by the monkey, and manure is provided by the little bunny, and the elephant is there to seek shade. I fell in love with this image. And then there are other auspicious signs. Here's the lotus and the parasol. The interior of the main halls and the many chapels are richly decorated, house numerous sculptures. And I just thought to provide another voice. I'll read here a brief quote from Percival Landon, the special correspondent of the Times who went to Nepal just after the British arrived. And he wrote, "Everything one touches drips with grease. The fumes of burning butter have in the course of many generations filmed over the surfaces and clogged the carving of the walls and doors alike. The floor was like a skating ring." And that rang true with me, because I stepped on butter on the floor and almost went flying. Tibet also was home to 20,000 monasteries. Monastic life was an integral part of Tibetan life. They were large structures, landowners, centers of learning, literature, medicine, amassed great wealth. Every family was supposed to send a family member into the monasteries. This is Drepung, which was one of the richest. This is Lhasa in the distance, founded in the 15th century. It once had 6,000 monks. And again, beautiful roof decorations. This is the river valley, some modern structures in the background. Lhasa, I'm not showing you all the modern development. My pictures are highly selective. I show you the old and the beautiful in my mind. Some scenes around the temple, people drinking tea, offices of monastery, well, of all the work that needs to be taken care of. White scarves that are draped here over a small painting. White scarves are presented as offerings to sculptures, to items of worship, and to visitors. And if you ever meet a lama, you're supposed to present a white scarf. Kitchens, I saw impressive kitchens in many temples. Of course, if they had to feed thousands of monks with the old pots, or maybe some of them not old, but they look probably like they have looked for centuries. And then here is an image of one of the Buddhas in the main hall of the Drepung Monastery in a close-up. And stepping back a little bit, you see there are many more sculptures of smaller images. I don't know if these are offerings that people present to the divinity. I imagine so. And here's one of those famous butter lamps. It's yak butter, by the way, that are lit as part of rituals. There are big ones, smaller ones. I was lucky to see a mandala, which is a painting. Well, a painting. It looks like a carpet, but it is an image of a, it represents the cosmos. It is an image of a gated city, of a palace of knowledge, and created by colored sand, which is deposited through thin, long tubes, almost like straws. Very, very meticulous. It's well, it's kind of a painting carried out with colored sand. These mandalas are created for special ceremonies, or they can, I don't know how large they can be, but I would say 4 feet by 4 feet is possibly what this was. And at the end of a determined period, they're destroyed. The colors are merged, and then the sand is returned into nature. Another scene of a large chapel, give you a little bit of the ambience. And a monastery nearby is called Sarah Monastery, which is known for monks practicing debates and very animated theatrical features. Just a little atmospheric image. From Lhasa, we went south past this turquoise lake called Yamdrok Lake. We went over a mountain pass, which was embellished with prayer flags. These have imprinted prayers that are applied with wood block printing, and I'm sure you've seen them everywhere. They're pretty popular out here in California. And the idea is that the wind carries the prayers as it goes through these flags. This is at the high point of the pass. It's of course a place where tourists step out, and immediately somebody came close to me with these enormous Tibetan mastiffs, and I'm terrified of dogs, but they were actually very nice. And it's one of those points where you have to pay to have your picture taken. It was well worth it. I never want to see one of those off a chain in the wilderness. Apparently, I was once told that people in Tibet who walk, Tibetans who walk, you know, because they live in the countryside, carry bags of dried bread to feed the dogs, because they do sometimes attack strangers. Well, that's somebody talking who's afraid of dogs. Scenes along the lake and petrified sheep. And then we went past another high peak of close to possibly 6,000 meters with a glacier, and some of the melting glacier water. You're possibly familiar with stupas. In Tibet, they're called shortens. It's a form that came from India, and allegedly the Buddha was buried in a stupa. Today, these stupas are also personifications of the Buddha. They're erected by pilgrims. They can be small reliquaries created in metal. They're just ubiquitous throughout the Buddhist world, and we're going to see a huge one in a moment. This one is embellished again at a mountain pass with prayer flags, and here's a nice close-up of a yak, which provides butter for the lamps, and hot tea is infused with butter in Tibet. It's called butter tea. We went on to a very beautiful old town called Gyantse, where a young husband raised the British flag in 1904, but it is far more famous and worthwhile visiting for this massive building called the Kumbum, which in the 15th century was erected by Nepali Newari artists, and that is a large-scale stupa. You see a fellow with a prayer wheel, and the top of stupas are surmounted by something called harmika, which carry the eyes of the Buddha in all 4 directions, and here we see one of them, and then surmounted by gilded rings and a parasol and other symbols. It's an extraordinary building with, here, let's go back. All these terraces contain chapels. Here's the entrance to one of those chapels. And the interior was polychrome sculpture created by Newari Nepalese craftsmen. Some are full with terrifying images. Some are lovely like these. The monastery in Gyantse is surmounted by this screen, like a drive-in movie theater, but it's the Tanka Wall, where at special festivals, large-scale rolled religious paintings are unrolled for the duration of the festival. And you see again gilded roof decorations that you've seen before. The inside contained very beautiful large bodhisattvas wearing brocade garments and jewelry. As the previous section that I read said, the passage of time has certainly left deposits, and surfaces are worn by rubbing, and it's all just incredibly lovely. And holy food are these colorful sculptures, sort of the same vibrant colors as what we saw in the mandala. These are made from ground barley mixed with butter. And again, they're offerings to the divinities. Here, a beautiful big large Buddha in the background. The seats of the monks with old lovely Tibetan chests and yellow hats. Two prominent sects in Tibet are the yellow and the redhead sects. There are many different schools of Buddhism. And library containing religious texts. Here's just a little atmospheric picture. And the next town we visited is Shigatse. It's the second largest town and home of the Panchen Lama in the Tashil Humpo Monastery. The Panchen Lama is another spiritual leader who's closely connected to the Dalai Lama, but situated in this town, Shigatse, which is quite a bit away from Lhasa. And you see pilgrims walking past these shortens, incredibly large, beautiful buildings with a view through one of the doorways. The doorways are always decorated with these little ruffled awnings, and then great halls containing large sculptures of the Buddha and large precious metal chortens, which are funerary monuments of Panchen Lamas, gilded or possibly even solid gold, encrusted with turquoise and coral and other stones. And just another view, it's a very prosperous, sprawling area. And an example of the detailed decorations. This seal, again, has a meaning. It is a symbol of occult knowledge. I had to do my research, which you find in vestibules, which this obviously is. You see two people carrying sculptures within the complex of the monastery. And my guess is, I don't know if they brought them as offerings or if they brought them to a temple to be blessed. But my guess is they were made in Patan in the Kathmandu Valley, where there's a very, very active metal production. The faces of such sculptures are gilded with lacquer and then covered with a gauze to protect the surface. I've seen that in Nepal, and I thought it was very charming the way they carried their sculptures. Shigatse also has a large market center. There you can buy everything you need. There were big gold jewelry stores here. There are in the market stalls that sell jewelry for the nomads, horse harnesses, prayer beads. Tibetans, I don't know, maybe some of you know about it, but if you Google Tibetan ornament, is incredibly rich with head ornaments, heavy necklaces, rings, etc. And I'm very interested in the culture people. I was quite happy to see that all of this is still there. And then low system resources. Here you buy the clothes that you need as a nomad in the Shantung or in this rough environment: fur hats, fur-lined jackets. Women wear long dresses with colorful aprons like this one. They're binoculars for sale. And then, you see this, this is the back of the head of a man in the market. Men have beautiful long thick hair and have a big, this looks like a jade bead and then like a silver secure the braid, and he's looking at a bead which is as like a bead we know from antiquity. I mean, it's beads like this were used by people thousands and thousands of years ago. I was then approached by these two little characters who wanted me to take their picture, and they also had beads, had no idea what was going on. Very charming. And you see prayer drums in the background. And then another beautiful scene of petting Kitty, wearing Nike shoes and Hello Kitty printed on his thick, puffy jacket. We're all itching to get going. This is the Yellow River, which flows east and joins the Brahmaputra and then goes into the Gulf of Bengal. It was fall. Then going past Lhasa, the landscape got bigger again. Absolutely impressive, right? This is so beautiful. With sandbanks in the river. People used inflated animal skins to float on this river. Oh yeah, here we have the animals. And the last spot I wanted to briefly show you is the Samye Monastery, the oldest monastery founded in the 8th century to train monks, with some very evocative images. It's hard to give you a full picture of the meandering rooms and the experience of what it is like to be in these monasteries and halls of the temples. It's like, what is the story of trying to figure out an elephant by touching its different body parts? Again, halls with furniture where the robes of the monks are piled up. And here we have a beautiful Tibetan trumpet. You may have seen those in museums. And then some secular images of people walking past prayer drums, some living quarters in the temple, and very well kept up and upkeep. Everything was really nicely cared for. And here you have some female visitors with long braided hair with colored ribbons incorporated in the large stupa at Samye Temple. And it's time to leave. This hearth here is burning juniper wood, which is one of the frequently used incense. And these juniper hearths also are one of the symbols that you encounter over and over again. And here are my guides with whom I spent 7 days. Wei Dong, the driver, and Na Wang, whose English name, Chinese people always say they have an English name. His English name was Jeffrey. They're eating momos, which are a staple food of Tibet. They're drinking spiced chai tea. And they were wonderful companions. I really, I fell apart when I said goodbye. I could have stayed there for much, much longer. Just to show you, I only covered a small amount of territory from Lhasa past the lake to Gyantse, Shigatse, and then this is where that's Samye Monastery is. By the way, let me see. I think Mount Everest is down here. I didn't know until I did my research that Everest is right on the border between Nepal and Tibet. And they took me to the airport, and then before I knew it, I was rattling. We took off at 3,600 meters, and I've never had such a rough start in a plane. This is the view south towards Nepal, and back in the distance, I could not capture them. I could see really, really tall, white peaked mountains. And then we went on to China, past a huge peak of more than 7,000 meters. And I knew that looking at my map, and I just said, well, I hope the pilot knows it's there. But of course he did. And this is, again, the river that goes into the Brahmaputra, the valley of Lhasa. And that is the end of my little presentation. I hope it opened maybe a few new windows. We collected a bit of information that Dave and Tom can share with you if you're interested to dive deeper into the subject. But thank you for bearing with me. I hope you could all see and hear it all right.
Thank you, Susanna. That was wonderful. Those are beautiful pictures and very atmospheric and evocative, and I loved it. There must be some questions.
Just gonna unmute. I just unmuted everybody, Tom. So if you have a question for Suzanne, this is a good. Don't everybody speak up at once. And if there aren't any questions, we have a little second part of the program that deals more specifically with the trains that operate on the route to Tibet.
I have a question about the amount of Han Chinese one saw in Lhasa and elsewhere in Tibet. The Chinese government is trying to weaken the power, of course, of the Dalai Lama and to have Tibet be woven closer into what they think of as Greater China. Was there much of a sense of the presence of these Han Chinese?
Yes, and you know, I feel a little bit ill-equipped to speak about the subject because it's not something I've studied in a lot of detail. I follow it, of course, but yes, there is a huge Chinese presence. What I did not show you is that opposite the Potala, I mean, if you Google historic pictures of the Potala, you see an old stupa. It's all, you know, in wilderness, more or less. There's no town. It is, today there is something that I call the new Tiananmen Square. There is a huge paved square. There are roads with, if it isn't Gucci, I mean, there are major fashion lines, at least when I was there. The contrast between the Yokang temple, the pilgrims, these interiors where, you know, old rituals live, and the glitzy new developments, it couldn't be any starker. And in Shigatse, for example, near Shigatse, I think, are mining activities. There are endless blocks of buildings, which, you know, I'm from I grew up in West Berlin, which look like the, you know, the buildings that we know were erected under the Soviets in the East. I mean, for me, these are difficult, you know, faceless environments. I'm a little self-conscious speaking about it, knowing we're live on Facebook, but and
Sorry.
yeah, I mean, yes, it's all true. And I think, you know, I think to some degree the railway is a wonderful thing. It allows people to go there. It allows Tibetans to travel easily, but it also brings a lot of other development, and the train was going to be continued to Shigatse. And you know, I'm sorry for going on and on. I'm somebody who kind of likes the undisturbed nature. I like thinking of travel in days when we didn't have paved roads or airplanes, but time moves on and there's development everywhere.
Any other questions for Suzanne?
I have a question, Suzanne. Were your guides Han Chinese or were they Tibetans? Your two guides.
That is a question that I have not been able to answer. You know, the names Wei Dong and Na Wang would be
Can't tell from that.
Chinese, right? I don't know, the large, tall driver, I thought could be Tibetan. They were, the guide, Jeffrey, was very knowledgeable. But of course, I had no way of telling. And I didn't ask. I should have asked. I was not quite comfortable for some reason.
Yep. I think,
How about,
yeah.
sorry.
Alan? Oh, Alan, you'll have to Alan, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Here. Suzanne, I would just like to say thank you very much for opening up a new world to all of us, showing us things that most of us will never have the opportunity to see. But it's just a reminder that we are a world community, even though parts of the world are very different. And traveling to these places vicariously through you, and thank you very much, just, it really opened my heart to just this incredible awareness of the fact that this is a grand place we live. And I agree with your assessment about travel. Although I'm a retired locomotive engineer and did drive trains for a living, the thought of being able to go to places where you can't fly into or take a train to, you have to walk there, it's becoming lost. So I'm glad to see that you portrayed lots of bits of ethnic history that still survive. I mean, it was like walking through a museum of history through your eyes and through your love of travel and through your love of people. So I'm a devotee of yours, and I thank you profoundly for what you've given.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
And any other questions for
Yes, I
Suzanne?
have a question.
Somebody got a question?
Yes, Tom Savio.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Yes, how did you accommodate the altitude? And was there any provisions for oxygen on the train?
I forgot to mention that. Yes.
Yes,
so
there is. I'll cover that.
there is. And I think there are, I don't know, you will find out if they actually pump oxygen into the train cars like on planes.
I'll speak to that, Suzanne.
But they also, anyway, I did not have any problems. I was very lucky. I stepped off the train and I was able the next day to walk up to the Potala door without a problem. I didn't have headaches. I didn't need to buy oxygen. You know that you can get oxygen, but I did something. I had forgotten that too. I went to a pharmacy in Shanghai and you can get special medication for high altitude. And I got a Tibetan medication, which I took. And maybe that did me good.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Did you detect any hostility towards the Chinese or towards the Chinese government from the Tibetans? Or how were you able to communicate with real Tibetans in a way?
You know, I was not, and that is the shortcoming of a very short trip where, I mean, first of all, it's very hard to get into Tibet for any length of time, but I could not communicate with Tibetans.
Okay, well, that's
And
understandable.
I think, there's a lot of information, a lot of literature out there. I think there are resentments. We all know it's a hugely, hugely complicated situation.
Right.
I wish I would be able to go back one day in a more professional engagement and then have an opportunity to really collaborate with people and have conversations. As a tourist, you just, well, I also was by myself. I don't know if
Okay.
I mean, for example, just one other facet. There's when you get close to the Yokang temple, the different open plazas around, but you have to go through metal detectors. It is not as blissful as my pictures make it look.
Yeah.
I have a question. Did you run into any trouble taking pictures? Trouble with authorities?
No, actually, I did not. I could have. I think there are areas where you're not allowed to take pictures. But anyway, I had no trouble at all. And the people greeted me. I mean, the old people are very traditional, and the traditional Tibetan greeting is to stick the tongue out. So that in the Potala Palace, after I went up there huffing and puffing, there were old ladies approaching me, sticking their tongue out, and the greeting is Tashi Delay.
So I guess Gene Simmons was Tibetan. Joke went over everybody's head.
No, yeah.
Okay, anything else? If not, thank you very much, Suzanne. And it is getting late. I want to move on to the other part of the program. And so I will.
I'm going to leave you.
Okay, Suzanne, thank you so much. We great.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Welcome.
Really,
Enjoy your dinner.
Yes, enjoy your dinner.
Yeah. Meeting up with Jane now.
Yeah, say hi to Jane for me.
I
Yeah.
will. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and stay safe and well, everybody.
It was our pleasure. Okay, so
Bye.
just to move on here, I am I'm going to mute everybody again, and okay. So because Suzanne's program really didn't have an awful lot about the trains in it, with Tom Chase's help, I put together a little bit of stuff about the train, and I will introduce this by saying that I am no expert on Chinese railways or Tibetan railways. Everything I know, which is pretty much summed up in these the next slides that I'll show, I learned in the last 2 days. So if you got technical questions, I'm probably not the person to answer them. But anyway, here we go. Okay, so for the most part, these slides will tell their own story, and there's nothing worse than somebody just reading PowerPoint presentation. So I'll try not to do that. But I will say that all the stuff that's in this presentation was grabbed off the internet, Wikipedia, various other sites, and so we could well have violated a few copyright restrictions here, but c'est la vie. So this is the route that Suzanne's train took, Shanghai over here. and through to Lhasa, and the rail line now has been extended on further into Tibet. And there's quite an extensive network of train services with the destination being Lhasa. Shanghai is but one of the origin points for Tibet trains. Beijing, Guangzhou, Chongqing, Chengdu. Tibet trains are advertised and marketed departing from all of these various locations. A few scenes of what you get to look at, and on the train, these are similar to the images that Suzanne showed us. And this part of the line is still electrified. The part going into Lhasa is not electrified. So this is the highest elevation station on the line. And then a couple views of the Lhasa station. You can see quite modern facility, very large. And then we get to the train itself. And sorry, I'm just getting something out of the way here. So somebody in the chat made the comment that those look like they were GE built. And in fact, locomotives that have been used on the Tibet service were built by General Electric in Erie, Pennsylvania, based on a standard -9-44. See the rest of it. They were customized for high altitude operation. And one reason that China Railways bought these American-made locomotives is they didn't have anything at the time that was suitable for high elevation use, where of course the atmosphere is a lot thinner. So China Railways purchased 78 units, which were numbered 001 to 0078. And these locomotives, you can find pictures, they were used on both passenger and freight service. Later on, the Chinese developed their own, what they call the HXN3 locomotives, which have been introduced on the Tibet line. It's unclear to me whether they're in use on passenger service, but they're certainly in use on freight service. And come on. Seem to be stuck here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the General Electric locomotives are being supplanted by these HXN3 locomotives, which are actually an EMD design, AC traction, 6,000 horsepower, jointly manufactured by EMD and Dalian Locomotive Works. So the first 30 of them are single cab locomotives, which is what you see here, that are used in the passenger service on the, or at least in use on the Tibet line. And this actually is on a passenger train. They're also, the rest of the order includes a lot of dual cab units, which are used on freight service. The train itself, the coaches are called plateau coaches because the train crosses the Great Plateau there on its way to Tibet. So this is the exterior of a typical coach. Nothing particularly astounding in terms of the design of the equipment. hard coach seating is 3 and 2 seating. It appears that they may be facing seats that don't recline. One travel site that I saw basically said, you don't really want to travel in hard coach. It's a 48-hour journey from Shanghai to, or 46 hours from Shanghai to Lhasa. But, you know, fairly typical, almost the appearance of a commuter coach. And then you've got the hard sleeper. So these are basically an open, almost like racks or 3-tiered bunks. No privacy. And then you get the soft sleeper, which was what Suzanne traveled in, facing seats that will make up into a berth. You can see there's also an upper berth. It's unclear to me how many people these actually will accommodate. You get to the dining car, Suzanne had.
Dave, I think she said there were 4, not 4 in the softs.
Okay, well that would correspond to the facing seats. Each make a bed, and then the upper berth as well. So it's not quite the same thing as a viewliner compartment that you have all to yourself. So dining car, certainly a far cry from what Amtrak is proffering us these days. The menu is traditional Chinese dishes prepared on board. And then the trains are equipped with Western-style toilet rooms, and there's a public washing area along the corridor, I believe on the right side here, going off into the vestibule. But I found this very interesting. At the end of each carriage, there's 2 types of toilets. So on the left, you've got the classic Western-style toilet with, you'll note, a rather ill-fitting toilet seat. And on the right side is the Chinese-style toilet, basically the squat variety. So it's one way to introduce yourself to Chinese culture. And in addition, there are, I think in terms of just drinking water, they provide bottled water. But they also have these dispensers in every coach that dispense hot water, so you can make tea or whatever hot beverage right from the tap there. And there was a question about oxygen. So there's a variety of oxygen outlets throughout the train. In the coaches, they're actually underneath the seats. And they do, I found a picture that I didn't include it here, but much as airlines in the United States used to offer you up a headset that had been sealed in a little plastic bag. On board the Chinese trains, they offer an oxygen tube, much like the typical tube you'd see, you know, somebody who's using supplemental oxygen. So these are distributed throughout the train. And so what's it cost? Well, this was from the ChinaTibetTrain.com site, and they offer a whole bunch of tours, but $475 US to for a 5-day tour, small group tour. So that was that, and I will just show you one more thing here. Oh, come on. So this is there are a whole bunch of companies that offer Tibet train tours, and here's some of the pricing there. So, and I did actually look at one of the schedules, and they have departures basically. I think I looked at Shanghai, but anyway, departures every other day. So anyway, that is a little bit of a taste of what the Tibetan railway trains are. One of the things I found in the course of poking around looking for information about the trains is originally some of the General Electric locomotives were purchased as basically to have extras. But the service to Tibet has been proven to be so popular that they've increased the number of trains, and basically we're using pretty much all of the locomotives. So anyway, if anybody has any questions about that, we'll entertain any questions, and if not, what we're going to do is
Just one
meeting if there aren't
one
any.
question.
Yeah,
Just one question. If you're going to go with a tour, do they take care of the necessary paperwork to get into Tibet? And if you don't take a tour and you want to go into Tibet, do you have to get all the clearances ahead of time? And do you need someone to do those documents?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
One of the sites I read said that you have to go as a tour, that you can't go as a private traveler. So Suzanne's paper listed 5 people.
Ah, okay. I thought you were sponsored by an organization or something.
No. I think you have to. Yeah. Some of the Lawrence helpfully sent me a couple of things from International Traveler magazine, and in those they talked about how to get a visa. Years ago, when I was traveling to China, getting a visa was difficult, and I think it hasn't changed much. You can now actually hire somebody to go to the Chinese consulate in DC and get your visa. I used to have to do it. Well, since I lived there, I did it myself, but it was always a certain amount of paperwork had to be gone through to get into China.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's probably more difficult now than it was even just a few years ago, given the shaky state of U.S.-Chinese relations.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now, I'm going to, if there's no real significant questions, I'm going to close the the formal program, but we're going to keep the Zoom meeting open for a bit longer, so that if you want to stick around and chat or have any more questions, we can do that. But we're going to stop the live stream and stop the recording at this point. So
I have a question.
Go ahead, Tom.
I have a question for Doug Kidd. Doug, can you hear me? Okay. Look, I think maybe if you put your cursor up in the there, it looks like you're unmuted.
Okay, I think I got unmuted now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, actually, I tried to ask the lady, Susanna,